Out of Jeangi's sight, there was a dark tide surging beneath Tianhai City. It was already winter, and Tianhai City was welcoming its coldest winter yet. Outside the shelter, it was snowing so heavily that it was impossible to see the distant landscape. Inside the shelter, however, it was warm and peaceful. The fireplace was burning brightly, and the flames were warm and comforting. Flower and Totoro had become good friends, and the two cute pets played and fought all day long, from upstairs to the basement. Yang Xia and Aunt Zhou Jaime were in the open kitchen, studying how to bake new pastries for the upcoming holiday. Fatty Sue was being held down by Uncle Yu in the basement training ground, undergoing grueling training every day. After a few months, his skin was peeling off. Everyone else was also busy, but although they weren't idle, they were incredibly relaxed. The inside of the shelter and the outside world were like two completely different worlds. In the distance from the shelter, a thick layer of snow and ice was suddenly pushed up, forming a tiny crack. Then, a cockroach emerged from the crack. Its body was the size of a palm and covered with a layer of blue frost crystals. After crawling out from under the snow, it cautiously looked toward the huge shelter in the distance. After a long time, it returned underground. Passing through thick ice and frozen soil, it arrived in a dark and damp sewer pipe. This pipe, which had been abandoned for a year, was crawling with cockroaches of various sizes. After returning underground, the blue cockroach seemed to communicate with the cockroach swarm. Soon, in the long and vast underground network, a terrifying army of cockroaches began to avoid the shelter that exuded a terrifying aura, like a river encountering a giant rock and having to split apart, rushing to other areas. On this day, a heavy snowfall sealed the city, and everyone was trapped in their homes, unable to go out. However, the three major bases were not as leisurely as the people in the shelter. They had long since adapted to the cold, and despite the snow, everyone had to work. Rest was a luxury they couldn't afford. While they didn't work according to the 7-week schedule, they only had 2 days off per month. During a snowstorm, everyone had to come out in time to clear the snow from the perimeter of the base. Otherwise, according to custom, if it snowed continuously for a day and a night, the entire underground shelter would be completely covered, which would be very troublesome. So, around Chiaoyu base, everyone wore thick clothes, held snow shovels, and began to work in the heavy snow. Lu Dehai and Qin Jingwan were also nearby supervising the work. Qin Jingwan stood with his hands behind his back, looking calm and composed. He prided himself on his higher education and always presented himself as a scholarly general in the army. Therefore, when commanding, he often liked to have his subordinates convey his will to avoid affecting his image by shouting and yelling. However, Lu Dehai didn't care about any of that. He kept Zhangyi's words in mind and did his best to maintain order at the Chiaoyu base, so he always worked hard to cooperate with Qin Jingwan. The two had been working together for some time. Qin Jingwan had always been wary of Lu Dehai. In their daily work, he would often scold him and assign him difficult or unpopular tasks. Lu Dehai, on the other hand, worked hard and obeyed orders without complaint. By now, the relationship between the two had at least eased on the surface. Clean up the entrance to the base first. Otherwise, the snow will pile up and block the entrance, which will cause trouble. It's so cold, the snow won't melt even if it stops. It will freeze into a block and take 3 to 5 days to clear. Lu Dehai shouted loudly, directing the workers in the base. The workers worked silently, cursing the damn weather, the damn doomsday, and the damn Lu Dehai, Qin Jingwan, and the rest of the dog leaders. However, they didn't dare to slack off. If they were caught, their dinner might be deducted. One of the laborers raised his snow shovel, dug it into the snow pile, stomped on it twice with his foot, and then lifted it up with all his strength. But when he lifted the shovel, he suddenly noticed a large black hole in the snow. Huh! How did this spot become empty? The laborer curiously went over to take a look. The next moment, the most terrifying and final scene of his life came into view. From the dark snow hole, a cockroach head as big as a human head suddenly popped out and pounced on his face. Ah! The cockroach opened its mouth and its sharp, barbed front legs pierced his face. Poochie! His face was torn off. In such a cold environment, the cockroach was covered in poison from eating rotten meat and garbage. The laborer immediately blacked out and collapsed on the ground. The cockroach crawled onto his head and, ignoring the other laborers who were too scared to move, began to gnaw on his skull. Soon, the dark hole rapidly expanded, and cockroaches of all sizes poured out of it like a tide. At this point, the terrified laborers finally came to their senses. Such a terrifying scene left them utterly terrified. They immediately dropped their tools and ran frantically in the opposite direction of the cockroach swarm. The massive snow cave seemed like an endless magical treasure, continuously spewing out cockroaches that quickly covered the entire snow-covered ground. Buzz, 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 buzz. Some of the larger cockroaches flapped their wings and took to the air, diving toward the laborers. This all happened in an instant, completely unexpected by anyone. Humans are naturally repulsed by cockroaches, and some even fear these disgusting creatures that are extremely difficult to kill. When Lu Dehai saw the scene, he immediately thought of the order Jeangi had given, but at that time, Chen Jingwan had only responded half-heartedly. He did not conduct a thorough search of the base's surroundings. But who could have thought that so many mutant cockroaches would appear? Quick, fire at them, fire at them. Don't let them get close to the base. Lu Dehai shouted loudly. A brown light flashed in his eyes, and then his entire body underwent a noticeable change. Two bone swords shot out from his arms with a clang. He drew a pistol from his waist and shot several giant cockroaches. Under his lead, the other base guards reacted and rushed forward, opening fire on the massive, terrifying swarm of cockroaches. Due to the heavy snowfall, almost everyone in the base ran out to clear the snow. A sudden wave of cockroaches caught everyone off guard. Led by Lu Dehai, the soldiers of the guard began to take out their weapons and launch an attack on the cockroaches. Seeing this, Chen Jingwan, who was directing everyone's work from the rear, was shocked and hurriedly turned on the loudspeaker to give orders to everyone. Children under the age of 14, hurry up and hide in the shelter. The guards must guard the entrance and not let the insects enter the underground. Fire extinguishers, get the fire extinguishers ready. Seeing the terrifying tide of cockroaches, Chen Jingwan also felt an instinctive fear. Of the three major bases in Tianhai City, Chiaoyu base was the weakest. Now, they had less than 10 mutants, and in the previous wars in Tianhai City, more than 70% of their defensive forces had been destroyed. Later, as Zhangyi's strength grew stronger and stronger, Tianhai City had not experienced any major crises for quite some time. It was only at this moment that he recalled the fear of being surrounded by death. A strong sense of regret arose in his heart. If he had paid more attention when Jeangi warned him, the entire base would not have been caught off guard by such a sudden attack. Everyone follow me and block them. Chen Jingwan drew the gun from his waist and quickly rushed to the front line. Bang! 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 With a determined look in his eyes, he fired bullet after bullet at the cockroaches flying through the air. More than a dozen workers had already been knocked to the ground by the cockroaches, which began to gnaw on them viciously, their cries of pain echoing throughout the area. Bring in the heavy weapons! Chen Jingwan shouted. The guards began to throw grenades, and one exploded among the black swarm of insects, immediately clearing a large area. But in less than 2 seconds, that area was quickly filled with cockroaches again. The dark cave seemed to be endlessly spewing out cockroaches. The smallest cockroaches were only the size of a finger, while the largest were more than 2 meters long and had become monsters. Due to the Chiaoyu base's lack of preparation, the insect repellent equipment was brought over very late. Flamethrowers were one of the best weapons against this kind of insect swarm. In addition, there were hand grenades and rocket launchers. Lu Dehai stood in front of the tide of cockroaches like a fish swimming in water. After injecting himself with the medicine Jeangi had given him, his ability index had now reached 6,000 points, which was on par with the average member of the investigation squad. He waved the bone blades on his arms in front of the cockroach tide, picking out the giant cockroaches to fight. He had no way of dealing with the small cockroaches, but they were just disgusting and couldn't cause much harm to the people in the base in a short period of time. But the large ones were truly capable of eating people. The black tide of cockroaches flooded the entire land, completely crushing the human defense line in less than a minute and approaching the underground shelter. Some small cockroaches were even flapping their wings and flying into the shelter. Whoosh, whoosh. The soldiers using flamethrowers roared and turned their flamethrowers to maximum power, and the dozen-meter-long tongues of fire instantly engulfed tens of thousands of cockroaches. However, these creatures were fearless. Their only purpose in life was to eat and reproduce. Soon, soldiers also had cockroaches crawling up their pants. Ah! The soldier screamed in terror, and in the blink of an eye, tens of thousands of cockroaches covered his entire body. He screamed in terror and pain, but he did not die immediately. The cockroaches' attack power was limited, and they were hungry, gnawing at the soldier's flesh, which was as painful as torture for him. But he couldn't die in such a short time. The soldier rolled around on the ground frantically, but he couldn't get rid of the cockroaches on his body. Instead, more cockroaches crawled onto him. Qinling was filled with grief and ended the soldier's life with a single shot. "Boss, let's retreat!" A bodyguard shouted to Qinling with a look of anxiety on his face. If things continued like this, it was only a matter of time before they were completely swallowed by the tide of cockroaches. Qinling looked at the square. The incident had happened suddenly, and most people did not have the strength to fight back and were still running back desperately. If he entered the shelter at this time and closed the doors, he would be able to survive. But then all these people would die. Qinling's eyes turned red, he gritted his teeth and clenched his fists so hard they cracked. He regretted it so much that he wanted to slap himself. If he had listened to Jeangi and taken the mutant cockroaches more seriously, he would never have ended up in this mess. At this point, he had no way out. If he ran away and caused half of the Chiaoyu base to die in the cockroach tide, Jeangi would never forgive him. Retreating meant certain death, so he might as well fight his way out. Don't retreat. If you retreat, your families and friends will die. Focus your firepower and guard the entrance. Let the children come in first. Qinling threw a grenade with all his might, blowing up a group of cockroaches. At the same time, he made an emergency call to Jeangi. "Hello, boss, help, help!" Jeangi received Qinling's call and saw that he was on the verge of collapse. Jeangi frowned. "What's wrong? Enemy attack?" "Boss, cockroaches, there are so many cockroaches. We can't hold the base much longer. Please, hurry and save us." Jeangi's eyebrows immediately shot up. Cockroaches? He never thought that his initial guess would come true. In such a short time, those mutant cockroaches had actually posed such a threat to the base in Tianhai City. Jeangi certainly couldn't just sit idly by. Chiaoyu base was his important seaport and fishing base. "Wait for me." As soon as Jeangi finished speaking, he disappeared from the spot with a whoosh and headed straight for Chiaoyu base. At Chiaoyu harbor, workers fell down in agony, becoming food for the cockroaches. Above those small cockroaches were mutated creatures as big as cows and sheep, staring at the living with gloomy eyes and flapping their wings as they swooped down to kill. Lu Dehai and Qinling led their guards in a desperate attempt to stop them. They killed many cockroaches, but these insects were quick to find gaps and soon reached their feet. The defensive circle retreated again and again. Boom! Suddenly, there was a loud noise from underground, and the thick snow and ice were shaken apart. A giant cockroach more than 3 meters long crawled out from underneath and stood upright. Its entire body was covered in disgusting feces-colored armor, and its sharp lower jaw moved slightly before it charged straight at the soldiers in the defensive circle. Qinling, Lu Dehai, and the others felt their scalps tingle. Such a huge swarm of cockroaches would grow like poisonous insects, and when food was scarce, they would devour each other. Who knew what kind of monsters would eventually emerge? Could they still hold them back? The giant mutant cockroaches that emerged from under the snow caused huge casualties as soon as they appeared. Their sharp claws and pointed jaws could easily tear off the skulls of soldiers and suck out their brains. These creatures seemed to be very picky, eating only the most delicious brains, and as soon as the bodies fell, they were immediately covered by other cockroaches. In the blink of an eye, 7 or 8 soldiers were killed. Flamethrowers, bullets, and grenades had little effect on it. Qinling gritted his teeth and said, "Damn thing, let me get it." He leaped forward, his whole body springing like a bullet toward the cockroach. The giant cockroach wrestled with him, flapping its wings, then launched an attack on Qinling with its sharp claws and teeth. Qinling's ability, Rubber Man, was most effective against mutants and mutant beasts in close combat. He nimbly dodged the giant cockroach's attacks, then wrapped himself around its body like a python. Once he had completely entangled the cockroach, he began to exert force to strangle it. Screech! Screech! The giant cockroach was in pain, and cracks appeared in its shell. It desperately tried to cut Qinling's body, but Rubber Man was highly resistant to such physical attacks, and Qinling ignored it completely. Die! Qinling growled angrily. He had to kill these big guys first, because they were the real danger. As long as they were dealt with, the remaining small cockroaches would still be troublesome, but they could be slowly cleaned up, minimizing the damage to the entire base. The python-like body continued to exert force, and the giant cockroaches' bodies began to deform and twist. But just at this moment, some holes suddenly opened on the giant cockroaches' bodies, and then a large amount of yellow gas spurted out. Qinling did not prepare in advance, so he was not wearing his combat suit. The yellow gas involuntarily entered his body, and soon his face turned pitch black, and the world around him grew dark. The body tightly wrapped around the giant cockroach also fell limp and lifeless. The giant cockroach screeched excitedly, then turned around, raised its sword-like front legs, and slashed down at Qinling. At this moment, no one could help him, because Lu Dehai had entered the battlefield earlier than him and was fighting many giant cockroaches on his own. At the critical moment, Jeangi finally arrived. Only he could cross the distance of almost the entire city of Tianhai in such a short time to come to the rescue. Jeangi hovered in midair and couldn't help but swallow hard when he saw the scene below. The snowy ground within a radius of several kilometers was covered with those disgusting creatures. Jeangi's trypophobia kicked in. However, he quickly took action, raised his right hand, and with a flick of his fingers, more than a dozen void blades slashed and shattered the giant cockroach. Whoosh! Jeangi instantly shuttled to Qinling's side and rescued him from the dangerous situation where he was about to be devoured by the cockroaches. The scene before his eyes made him frown. The cockroaches had already entangled the people in the base. He could certainly kill all of these cockroaches, but what about the workers? After thinking for a moment, Jeangi made a decision. He raised his hand and opened a dimensional gate at the entrance of the base, shouting to everyone, "Come back, quick!" While speaking, he took out the White Eagle and began to shoot continuously at the large individuals in the swarm of cockroaches. One after another, black beams shot out from the White Eagle's muzzle, and with the help of its precision shot ability, all of the most threatening cockroaches were turned into particles. No one knew what Jeangi was up to, but they trusted him because he was now the guardian of Tianhai City. Under Jeangi's cover, the pressure on everyone at Chiaoyu base was greatly reduced. Although many people were covered with cockroaches, these little creatures were only disgusting and would not pose a threat to human life in the short term. Jeangi stood calmly at the entrance of the shelter, with the two realms junction protecting his body. Two pistols continuously fired black beams. Each beam killed a giant cockroach. He ignored the smaller cockroaches, allowing them to follow the humans into his dimensional space. Those who entered the dimensional space were instantly transferred to the safe haven by Jeangi, preventing them from being harmed. However, the cockroaches were transferred several kilometers away, where they repeated their attack. In less than 2 minutes, everyone was rescued by Jeangi. The huge tide of cockroaches was really like a wave, even piling up 5 or 6 meters high. When these disgusting little creatures gathered together, their cries were extremely creepy. "Okay, everyone who needs to be saved has been saved," Jeangi said indifferently, then elegantly turned the White Eagle in his hands. "Start clearing the area." The White Eagle had been modified and equipped with the world's latest energy storage laser device. It could store the energy of mutants and then fire it out in the form of energy waves. Therefore, as long as it was used skillfully, the output power could be completely controlled. Jeangi raised his hands, the corners of his mouth curving into a smile, revealing his snow-white teeth. "Hey!" He pulled the trigger, and a series of black light spheres shot toward the tide of cockroaches in front of him. There were no powerful energy fluctuations. After the power of the void fell, a small spherical space appeared, and in an instant, all the cockroaches within a space of several dozen cubic meters were reduced to nothing. It was as if someone had used an eraser to clean up the messy scribbles in a notebook. Jeangi was now an epsilon-level mutant, and the supernatural energy inside his body was so vast that it far exceeded the imagination of ordinary mutants. One after another, the bullets of void energy shot out, as gorgeous as a black fireworks display. The huge tide of cockroaches disappeared at a speed visible to the naked eye. A minute later, the front of Chiaoyu base was quiet. Almost all the cockroaches had been cleared away by Jeangi, with only a few scattered cockroaches still crawling toward the shelter on the ground, fearless of death. Jeangi made a cool move, holstered his gun, broke the barrier in front of the doors of the refuge, and then turned and walked away. Everyone behind him was shocked by Jeangi's cool rescue. They looked at Jeangi as if he were a god. Several soldiers hurriedly grabbed flamethrowers and went out to clear away the remaining cockroaches. "Mr. Zhang." Lu Dehai panted heavily and bowed respectfully to Jeangi. The survivors of the base also bowed and called him sir. Jeangi nodded, his gaze passing over them and looking at Chen Jingguan, who was being rescued nearby. His condition was very bad, his whole face was black, and he looked like a dead man. No one knew how many viruses were in the poisonous mist sprayed by the cockroaches, and without a gas mask, no one could withstand even a single breath. Jeangi looked at Chen Jingguan, who was dying, and frowned. He took the antidote and antibiotics from the dimensional space and rolled over to the doctor's side. The doctors at the base saw these valuable items and hurriedly took them to Chen Jingguan. "How is he? Can you save him?" Jeangi asked. Several doctors were already busy and sweating profusely. One doctor said with embarrassment, "We need to draw blood for testing. General Chen has been infected with a very serious bacteria. The medical level of our base is somewhat inadequate." Jeangi rubbed his forehead and said, "Wait." He turned and left, and soon brought Zhou back. Zhou had already put on her medical equipment and walked to Chen Jingguan's bedside. Her abilities were now even stronger than before. A soft white light emanated from her hands and gently swept over Chen Jingguan's body, like an X-ray, examining the inside of his body clearly. It is indeed a serious bacterial infection. She quickly administered the medicine to Chen Jingguan, and after a flurry of activity, the blackness on Chen Jingguan's face finally receded. However, he looked terribly weak, his face pale. When he opened his eyes and saw Jeangi and Zhou, he was instantly filled with shame. "Boss, I'm sorry, He pursed his dry lips, not knowing what to say at this moment. Jeangi looked down at him and asked lightly, "How did you get so messed up? Didn't I remind you to be careful of mutant creatures? Even if I didn't say anything, didn't you learn anything from the zombie outbreak in Tianhai City?" Chen Jingguan, Jeangi turned his head to look at Lu Dehai, who was not far away. Lu Dehai hurriedly bowed his head to Jeangi. Jeangi said, "From now on, Chiaoyu base will be temporarily handed over to Lu Dehai. Chen Jingguan will be demoted to deputy, and you should take care of your health for now." Lu Dehai couldn't help but feel excited inside and quietly clenched his fists. He had finally waited for this opportunity. The opportunity to become someone important. His two brothers, Rong Lei and Yu Gang, exchanged excited glances, filled with joy. During the previous battle, they had also fought bravely so as not to hold back their brother. Now, it was time for them to reap the rewards. Lu Dehai shouted loudly, "Yes, Mr. Zhang. I will do my best." Jeangi said indifferently, "It's only temporary. If you don't do well, I will replace you with someone else." Lu Dehai was a mutant, which was why Jeangi was supporting him. But combat ability alone was not enough. He also had to have management skills, and most importantly, he had to be loyal to Jeangi. He could give Lu Dehai a chance, but it depended on whether Lu Dehai was the right material. Lu Dehai hurriedly said, "I understand." Qin Jingguan felt guilty at this moment. Even though he knew that Zhang Yi was deliberately supporting Lu Dehai, he didn't have the face to say anything. Just at this moment, Zhang Yi received reports from Xiao Honglian and Xing Tian. It turned out that at the same time, their base had also been attacked by a tide of cockroaches. Zhang Yi asked, "How's it going over there?" Xiao Honglian was wearing a red combat uniform and standing on a high place in the factory. The trenches crisscrossing below were already a sea of fire. The cockroaches were being burned to death in large numbers, and the air was filled with the smell of protein. Xiao Honglian smiled slightly at the communication device and said, "Thanks to your warning, we were prepared early, so there was no damage." On the Qingpu base side, Xing Tian had also responded in advance, so there were no major casualties. Qin Jingguan listened to this from his hospital bed and felt even more ashamed. Zhang Yi didn't blame him at this time, but just shouted to Zhou Qi to leave the Chiaoyu base. He had said that he would not interfere too much in the operations of the three major bases. He hated wasting his energy managing too many people, so he let them handle their own affairs. Now it was up to Lu Dehai to see what he would do. Zhang Yi took Zhou Qi back to the shelter, took off his coat and threw it on the sofa, a thoughtful look in his eyes. Zhou Qi helped Zhang Yi tidy up his coat, took off her protective suit, revealing her curvaceous figure, and sat down next to Zhang Yi. "Zhang Yi, what's wrong? Did you discover something?" Zhang Yi nodded. "I feel something strange. This feeling is very similar to the zombie tide in Tianhai City back then. The three major bases were attacked at the same time. This can't be a coincidence. Either there's a highly intelligent leader among the cockroaches, or someone is controlling the cockroach swarm and launched the attack. And the shelter wasn't attacked, which clearly isn't a coincidence." Zhou Qi said, "Are you saying that someone wants to get rid of you?" Zhang Yi raised his eyebrows slightly. "Who knows? Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. I always like to think about things from a complicated angle, but I also tend to overthink things and complicate simple issues. At this point, I can't be completely sure." Zhang Yi was now a level Epsilon mutant. Looking at the whole world, he was also a first-tier powerhouse. According to common sense, few people would dare to oppose him. However, that didn't mean there weren't any. During his trip to Mist Valley, he had offended countries such as the Columbus Ocean Fleet, Neon, Scylla, and Marley. The East Sea region also had quite a few grievances against him. He couldn't completely guarantee that those guys wouldn't do something behind his back. Of course, from a rational and logical point of view, the probability of that was extremely low. Anyone who wanted to deal with an Epsilon-level mutant, especially in the Huashu Kingdom, would be extremely foolish. Could it be Zhu Zhen? Zhang Yi muttered to himself, but Zhu Zhen shouldn't be that stupid. He rubbed his head, somewhat confused. Seeing this, Zhou Qi immediately called everyone in the house to discuss a countermeasure. Everyone gathered in the living room. After hearing about the cockroach tide, many people felt horrified. They were not so much afraid of cockroaches as they were disgusted by them. The thought of cockroaches swarming like a tidal wave and crawling all over their bodies made almost everyone break out in goosebumps. This is strange. I remember that cockroaches are cold-blooded creatures. They can't move in low temperatures and will freeze to death. That's why cockroaches have never been a problem in the north. But why did so many cockroaches suddenly appear? Jeangi said, "That's easy to explain. Mutation is the answer to everything. The reason why cockroaches are so difficult to exterminate is because they are highly adaptable to their environment and have a terrifying reproductive capacity. Even if a cold snap causes a massive die-off, as long as 1 in a billion cockroaches develops a cold-resistant mutation, that gene can be passed down. If food is abundant, the number of offspring produced by a single pair of cockroaches is beyond calculation." The appearance of mutant cockroaches did not surprise anyone. If humans can mutate, then animals, plants, insects, all living things can naturally do so as well. They had seen them before. There were 2 mutant creatures in their homes. However, they had to take these organized and disciplined mutant creatures attacking humans seriously. The shadows of the zombie horde and rat swarm still lingered in their hearts. Yang Xinxin thought for a moment and said, "I don't think this is as simple as it seems. It's highly likely that someone is behind all this. It's not too early or too late, and it's definitely not a coincidence that they attacked the 3 major bases at the same time." Jeangi nodded. "I think so too, but I can't think of who it could be. If it was someone from a powerful organization who wanted revenge on Jeangi, they wouldn't use such childish methods." The cockroach swarm was at most disgusting to Jeangi and caused him some trouble, but it wouldn't hurt him or his companions. Yang Xinxin said, "This world is not what it used to be. Many things cannot be measured by common sense. So, brother, let's just take it as it comes and deal with the cockroach tide first. When the time comes, I believe the other side will naturally make their next move." Jeangi hugged his arms and leaned against the sofa, looking somewhat helpless. "Pest control? I don't seem to be very good at that. It took humans thousands of years to get rid of this species, and now who knows how they've spread in Tianhai City." Although Jeangi was very powerful, he really didn't have any good ideas when it came to killing insects. "If only we had a pest control team to help us right now." Jeangi sighed. A chorus of sighs rang out in the room. Pest control was really troublesome. Although it was troublesome, it had to be done. Jeangi quickly made a plan with his family. Since they had to kill the insects, insecticide was obviously the best choice. However, cockroaches have mutated, and considering their strong vitality, even if an insecticide is developed, they may adapt to it. The same applies to flooding. Even if some cockroaches are killed temporarily, it is impossible to completely eradicate the problem. After much thought, no one had a good solution. Even the world-renowned Chaos seemed helpless in the face of these troublesome insects. Of course, the shelter was not worried about being attacked by cockroaches. However, if the cockroaches were left to spread, the entire city of Tianhai would soon become a giant cockroach nest, which would be a headache for Jeangi. After much thought, he decided to seek help from Blizzard City. After all, they had more experience in dealing with mutant creatures. After receiving Zhang request for help, Zhu Zheng's mouth was about to split into a wide smile. Who knew how rare it was for Zhang to take the initiative to ask for his help? It's just killing insects. We've dealt with this kind of situation many times before. Don't worry, leave it to us. Blizzard City has no shortage of professional pest control experts. Soon, escorted by the Tengu squad, a team of professional pest control experts arrived in Tianhai City. They were indeed very professional. First, they captured a few mutant cockroaches, then quickly mixed the medicine. With the cooperation of the Tengu squad, they placed the drugs in areas where cockroaches were likely to appear. Wait a minute, won't these drugs pollute the soil and water? Jeangi raised his doubts. The insecticide expert who prepared the drugs explained to Jeangi, these are genetic drugs specially developed for the local mutant cockroaches. After ingesting the medication, they won't die immediately but will lose their reproductive ability and die within 7 days. Not only that, but their reproductive instincts will become extremely vigorous, causing them to mate frantically with members of the opposite sex harmoniously. The genetic medication will spread through this method. After listening to this, Jeangi couldn't help but applaud. This is brilliant. The biggest problem with cockroaches is their strong reproductive ability, and using this characteristic against them is very clever. After the insecticide expert's operation, sure enough, the insect infestation in Tianhai City quickly weakened until it was no longer visible. Jeangi couldn't help but feel emotional. There are always people who learn things earlier than others, and everyone has their own area of expertise. Everyone is like a screw, and when placed in the right position, they can play a role greater than that of a level epsilon mutant. After completing their mission, the insect extermination experts left Tianhai City, leaving their contact information with Jeangi before they left. They told him to contact them if any problems arose in the future. Before leaving, Jeangi asked them, Is it possible that the cockroaches will adapt to this drug and develop resistance? The pest control experts laughed. This is a genetic drug that targets specific gene sequences in their bodies. Unless these cockroaches undergo a large number of gene mutations, they will not be able to adapt. Jeangi nodded, a meaningful gleam flashing in his eyes. Then I can rest easy. If any problems arise in the future, we can basically conclude that someone is secretly tampering with the drugs. Jeangi saw them off, but instead of relaxing, he ordered the people at the 3 major bases not to let their guard down. Then, he waited quietly for things to unfold. West Mountain Base, in an abandoned cave. In the dim, damp, and foul-smelling space, an angry voice rang out. "Damn you, you killed my precious insects. But it doesn't matter. As long as my treasures aren't killed, they will become stronger and stronger. Anyway, Tianhai City has no shortage of food." In an abandoned laboratory, a faint brown light illuminated an ugly face. His face was covered with ugly pits, his 2 eyes were like Picasso's, one slanted and one vertical, and there were only a few sparse hairs on his head. He held several test tubes in his hands, mixing different colored chemicals together. In no time, he concocted a dark green potion. "The bugs I'm raising, you can't kill them all." He. He let out a laugh that sounded like a bug's chirping, then turned around and casually grabbed a cockroach the size of his thumb and stuffed it into the bottle. The cockroach struggled in the potion for a moment, then its body suddenly underwent a strange change. 7 or 8 pairs of legs sprouted from every corner of its body, and its entire body swelled to several times its original size, turning completely dark green. Pop! The flask was shattered, and the cockroach, covered in green slime, quickly crawled away. The ugly monster's eyes almost popped out of his head, and an ugly smile appeared on his face. "I will raise the hardest insect to kill. Jeangi, just wait and see, he. Less than 10 days after the cockroach tide disappeared, they reappeared from underground in Tianhai City. They unscrupulously invaded Tianhai City's major resource points. Supermarkets, material factories, and all activity points around the 3 major bases were invaded. One morning, Jeangi woke up and was shocked to find that Shujia town on the opposite bank of the Heron River had been invaded by a large number of cockroaches. "They're back. Just as I thought, someone is behind this." The abnormal activity of these creatures was definitely caused by human interference. Otherwise, it would not be in accordance with the laws of nature. Fortunately, over the past year, Jeangi had cleared out most of the supermarkets in Tianhai City. He had collected most of the important supplies, so he wasn't worried that the cockroaches would cause too much damage. But this situation couldn't go on. Jeangi immediately called the pest control experts in Blizzard City and asked them to come again. "Have the Tengu squad escort you here. The road might not be safe," Jeangi reminded them. If someone was really working behind the scenes, then it was highly likely that they would intercept the pest control experts. A few hours later, Li Changqing, Wu Di, and the others escorted the pest control experts to the scene. This is definitely abnormal. According to common sense, it's almost impossible for genetic drugs to adapt so quickly. I think there must be someone behind this, manipulating things in secret. The pest control expert frowned and expressed his opinion on the situation. He was a professional and had solemnly promised that there would be no more problems, but in the end, the cockroach invasion broke out again in just a few days. Of course, he had to explain himself. Jeangi said, "I know you've done a good job. However, I'm afraid I'll have to trouble you once more." Even someone like him, a level epsilon mutant, didn't have a good solution for exterminating insects. It wasn't possible to turn the entire city of Tianhai City upside down to kill the insects hiding in dark places underground, was it? The exterminators nodded and immediately got to work. They caught some more cockroaches, and after studying them, they were shocked. Sure enough, they have mutated again. They are almost a different species from the insects we found last time. Jeangi asked curiously, "Is that possible? For a species to undergo multiple major mutations in such a short period of time?" The insect exterminator replied, natural mutation is of course impossible. But if someone promotes it, it is possible. This was an era of mutations, where mutated creatures possessed all kinds of incredible abilities, and nothing could be measured by common sense. Jeangi laughed coldly in his heart. Now that he knew that humans were behind this, the problem would be easy to solve. He said to Bai Li Changqing and the insect extermination experts, "Everyone, I'm going to trouble you to stay here for a while and help me solve this insect problem." Bai Li Changqing naturally had no objections, and the insect extermination experts also knew who Jeangi was and said they were happy to help him. Jeangi arranged accommodation for them on the second floor of the basement. Then he called Yang Xinxin over to discuss a plan. It's been confirmed that there's definitely a human factor behind this. Xinxin, help me think of a plan. What should we do now to deal with this matter? Although he knew that someone was secretly messing with them, that person would definitely not be stupid enough to come out and get caught. Yang Xinxin said lightly, "Brother, I've already thought about this problem. First, we need to confirm who is likely to have targeted us. And what their purpose is. But this time, no matter how you look at it, there's something strange about it." Jeangi frowned. "Yeah, this time it's inexplicable. It's not like a year ago when we had to deal with swarms of rats and waves of corpses. But now, problems of that level can't threaten us anymore. So what's the point of the other side doing this?" Yang Xinxin opened her cherry lips and uttered two words, "Chaos." He wants to create chaos in Tianhai City. Jeangi smiled, "Tell me more." Yang Xinxin explained, "The cockroach swarm has no effect on you, brother. You are very powerful now, and there aren't many things that can affect you. But the three major bases are still weak, and we are not strong enough. You can't stay in Tianhai City forever to protect everyone, can you?" Jeangi instantly understood, and his expression became serious. "You mean he wants to harm you?" Yang Xinxin nodded. "If I were your enemy, I would definitely do that. Even if I couldn't kill you, I could still make you suffer by destroying the things you cherish." She suddenly revealed a playful smile and tilted her head to look at Jeangi. To hurt someone, to take revenge on someone, it's enough to make them feel pain, isn't it? Jeangi suddenly felt his skin grow cold. He subconsciously touched his arm and let out a long sigh. "I've thought about that too." As the king of survival, Jeangi had of course considered any consequences that might be unfavorable to him. This included someone attacking his weak spot. This was why Jeangi had spent so much time and energy over the past few months to improve the strength of everyone in the shelter. As for the three major bases, although Jeangi didn't have much affection for them, he would still feel a little sad if they were destroyed. He asked himself, if he were his opponent, and he knew he couldn't kill him directly, he would spare no effort to use all means to fight him. Create chaos, huh? Interesting, this is really interesting. Jeangi rubbed his forehead, unable to think of who would attack him. After all, since the end of the world, he had made many mortal enemies in order to survive. But how am I going to solve this problem? Jeangi was a little melancholic. He was not omnipotent, faced with enemies hiding in the shadows and using insects as weapons, he really didn't know how to deal with them. This was even more troublesome than facing the zombie tide back then. Zombies were at most a few million, and they could be killed by flooding or burning. But cockroaches, as long as a single pair survived underground, they could mutate and adapt to survive, feeding on the abundant corpses buried beneath the earth. It wouldn't take long for them to multiply into billions, even tens of billions, hundreds of billions, or trillions. Just as Jeangi was feeling gloomy, a small, white hand was placed on his shoulder. "Brother, you don't need to worry." Jeangi looked at Yang Xinxin, who was comforting him. Yang Xinxin smiled and said, "The other party doesn't dare to stand up and fight us, which shows that he's not strong enough and is just a buffoon. So, it's him who should be afraid, not you. Time is not on his side, but on ours. Let's just wait quietly and see how the story unfolds." Yang Xinxin calmed Jeangi's inner turmoil. Yang Xinxin was right, there was no need to be too anxious right now. The more anxious he was, the more likely he was to make mistakes. "You're right, Although the other party has caused a certain amount of chaos, they haven't caused any substantial damage to Tianhai City or to us. If they want to target me, they must use more vicious methods. Let's wait and see. In the following period, Jeangi had the insect exterminators carry out cockroach extermination in Tianhai City. Those cockroaches were indeed troublesome, but they had mutated in such a short time that it was impossible for any particularly powerful individuals to appear. Don't look at the Tengu squad and think they're useless when they're on a mission with Jeangi. That's only because Jeangi is too strong. Looking at the entire Jiangnan region, Bai Li Changqing's group may not be able to walk around with their heads held high, but missions below the captain level are a piece of cake for them. So it wasn't long before they once again suppressed the cockroach tide in Tianhai City. It felt like killing cockroaches in the kitchen with insecticide. Every time, they would kill a batch, but soon after, the survivors would continue to breed. Zhang Yi was not in a hurry. He and Yang Xinxin kept monitoring the situation in Tianhai City, trying to determine the location of the old nest based on the cockroaches' behavior patterns. As long as they collected enough samples, they would be able to use mathematical calculations to deduce the general location. However, one day, Yang Xinxin came to Zhang Yi with her computer, her face full of surprise, and said, "Brother, I suddenly discovered something interesting." Zhang Yi leaned over and asked, "Did you find the insect nest?" Yang Xinxin shook her head, "No, just the opposite. I found a place in Tianhai City that hasn't been affected by the cockroach tide. It's very interesting." Zhang Yi looked at the computer, which was displaying a map of Tianhai City. The extent of the cockroach tide was marked in different colors. However, when he zoomed in, two blank areas appeared. One area was naturally Zhang Yi and the other's refuge. The other area was relatively remote from the city, close to the outskirts of Tianhai City. This place was called Gaoyuan Village, or rural area of Tianhai City. That's right, even the biggest cities have rural areas. There were many such places surrounding Tianhai City. Strictly speaking, Shujia Town was also an urban-rural combination and belonged to a rural village. However, in the outlying areas, there were even more remote places that were genuine rural villages. These places were so remote that many locals in Tianhai City might never visit them in their entire lives. Gaoyuan Village. Interesting, there must be something wrong here. I have to go take a look. Yang Xinxin said, "Brother, be careful. This could be an enemy trap." Zhang Yi nodded, "Don't worry, no one in this world is more careful than me." Zhang Yi never underestimated any opponent, and he would never let his guard down when there was any possible danger. So he quickly put on his full combat uniform. In addition to his second-generation black combat uniform, he also put on a combat uniform that was custom-made for him. He actually checked all his weapons every day, but before leaving, he checked them again until he was sure that they were ready to use at any time. After arming himself to the teeth, he called Flower over. "Meow." Flower jumped into Zhang Yi's arms and looked up at him with his big round eyes. "Master, are we going out to play?" Zhang Yi smiled and stroked its soft fur a few times. "I'm going out for a bit. Stay home and watch the place. Right now, you're the strongest in the entire shelter besides me. You have to take on the responsibility of protecting everyone. With Flower here, unless a level Epsilon mutant appeared, no one could break into the shelter." "Meow." Flower understands. Flower jumped onto the sofa, then immediately changed to a focused expression, his eyes wide like copper bells, staring intently out the window. Zhang Yi thought about it and decided that it wasn't a good idea to go out alone. It would be best to find a bodyguard to avoid any accidents. So he went to find Liang Yu. Liang Yu heard that Zhang Yi wanted her to go with him, and a faint smile appeared on her face. "Okay." She didn't say much, but went straight back to her room, changed into her combat uniform, and then picked up the long, heavy tang sword, Dragon's Roar. Liang Yu walked out of the room and came to Zhang Yi, looking heroic. "Let's go." After confirming the location of Gaoyuan Village, Zhang Yi opened the dimensional gate and took Liang Yu with him as they shuttled over there. 10 days ago, the cockroach tide had just begun to wreak havoc in Tianhai City. Tianhai City, Gaoyuan Village. There are always villages like this on the outskirts of big cities. They mainly grow crops and supply them to the city, maintaining the city's operations like a blood transfusion. Gaoyuan Village was one such village. Although it was a rural village, it was actually quite prosperous thanks to the large city of Tianhai City. Most of the villagers made a living by growing vegetables in greenhouses and providing other daily necessities to Tianhai City. After the Ice Age, they survived by relying on their own self-reliance and stored supplies, just like Shujia Town. However, they were luckier than Shujia Town. They did not encounter the West Mountain Base or Jeangi, and because of their remote location, they were less affected by the zombie tide. Therefore, to this day, many villagers in Gaoyuan Village are still alive. Perhaps if the people of Shujia Town had not encountered Jeangi and the West Mountain Base, they would still be alive today. However, there are no ifs in this world, and there will always be people who can survive in the cracks. Sometimes, human vitality is no weaker than that of cockroaches. However, this time, the sudden outbreak of cockroaches brought them enormous trouble. No matter how terrifying the zombies looked, they could be killed one by one. But those pesky cockroaches did not attack the villagers first, but stole the food stored in the cellars under the snow. After several cockroach attacks, the already scarce food in Gaoyuan Village became even more scarce. Therefore, Gao Tianwu, the village chief of Gaoyuan Village, had a headache at this moment. At present, Gaoyuan Village's food supply would not last much longer. If they could not find a solution to the food problem within half a month, he was afraid that the entire village would fall into chaos. Anyone who had read history books knew what hungry people would become. They would either starve to death, kill each other, or even eat their own children. When that happened, Gaoyuan Village would be finished. Gao Tianwu, the village chief of Gaoyuan Village, sat in his office, worrying about the village's food supply for the next half-month. He knew very well that once the food ran out, the entire village would quickly collapse. However, after the apocalypse, growing food had become extremely difficult. Some of them were skilled farmers and knew how to use rotten wood to cultivate mushrooms, but those could only fill the gap in their food supply and were not enough to feed everyone. The most important staple foods such as rice and flour were running out. They had considered going to Tianhai City to gather more resources. More than half a year ago, they had found a way to cross the vast snowfields and come to Tianhai City to investigate. However, the situation in Tianhai City had discouraged them. It had long been divided among several large organizations. They were numerous and powerful, and they had firearms. It would be suicide for the people of Gaoyuan Village to fight them for supplies. Thinking of this, Gao Tianwu frowned deeply, worried about the future of his village. At that moment, there was a knock on the door. "Come in," Gao Tianwu said. The door was pushed open, and a young man with a simple appearance and tall stature walked in. This was Gao Tianwu's younger brother, Gao Changwang, who had been helping him maintain order in the village since the end of the world. Gao Tianwu forced a smile. "Xiao Guang, I sent you out to find supplies. How did it go?" Xiao Guang looked guilty, and Gao Tianwu's heart sank when he saw this. "Brother Wu, we've already searched everywhere within 10 miles of the village. What supplies could possibly be left? This time, I took a risk and took the brothers to a more distant place, but the heavy snow has buried everything. We don't have a clue." Gao Tianwu took a deep breath, his face full of worry. He knew very well how difficult it would be to leave the village to search for supplies at a time like this. Even if there were supplies that had not been discovered in the snow, a year of snowfall had long since buried those places where no one had set foot. With dozens of meters of thick snow, how long would it take them to dig it out with their bare hands? Even though he was a mutant with extraordinary powers, it would be difficult to complete such a troublesome task. Xiao Guang continued, "Brother Wu, if this continues, our village won't have enough food to last much longer. People have already started talking about it in private. Last night, I caught a few thieves trying to steal food. Should we teach them a lesson to warn the other villagers?" Gao Tianwu propped his chin up with one hand and said with a serious expression, "We can't do that. The villagers are stealing food because they are worried that there won't be enough to eat, so they want to hide some way to get through this difficult time. To put it bluntly, they just want to live. What's wrong with that?" Xiao Guang said with some dissatisfaction, "But if everyone does what they're doing, our village will be in chaos." Gao Tianwu leaned back in his chair and thought for a long time before slowly saying, "At this point, we must take some special measures. Send out the order that starting today, there will be only one meal a day. Except for those responsible for patrolling, everyone else should reduce their activities. As long as they don't move around, they won't feel hungry. When cooking porridge, add more water and less grain, that way, the grain will last a little longer." Xiao Guang's face was grim. "Brother Wu, everyone is already eating very little. If we do this, I'm afraid everyone will start to resent us." Gao Changwang said helplessly, "There's no other way. We'll just have to make the villagers suffer a little. I'll take the blame. I'll personally lead a team out to search for food these next few days. I don't believe that in a city as big as Tianhai City, there isn't enough food for the few hundred people in Gaoyuan village." Xiao Guang took his orders and left, then sent someone to spread the news. When the villagers heard this order, they immediately became noisy. A villager named Meng Chuan said, "We haven't had enough to eat for days. Now we have to add more water to the thin porridge. We might as well just drink water. How can Gao Tianwu be the village chief? If he can't get food, he shouldn't have become the village chief in the first place." Some villagers whispered, "You can't say that. If it weren't for Gao Tianwu and his brothers, how could we have fought against the big villages next door? They would have wiped us out long ago, and it would be questionable whether we could even survive." Meng Chuan snorted coldly, "That was then, this is now. No matter how good he was back then, who can guarantee that he hasn't changed his mind now? He makes us drink porridge every day, but maybe he's eating white flour bread behind our backs." Faced with Meng Chuan's harsh words, not all the villagers were ungrateful. Some immediately stood up and blamed Meng Chuan. "Don't talk nonsense, Gao Tianwu isn't that kind of person." Meng Chuan smiled coldly. He first carefully looked around, then whispered to the other villagers, "What do you know? That kid stole from his own people and put all the grain in his cellar. Do you really think he would share it with us? You're dreaming. I saw him sneak a big sack of grain out of the cellar myself. He was acting suspiciously. I don't know where he took it." When he said this, several villagers nearby stared wide-eyed. "Are you telling the truth?" Meng Chuan swore, "How could it be false? If I'm lying, you can cut out my tongue." The rumor spread like wildfire and quickly flew far and wide. Due to the food crisis in Gaoyuan village, the villagers were unable to eat their fill, which caused resentment to grow in their hearts. At this time, a tiny spark was enough to plant the seeds of doubt in their hearts. With the right soil, all it took was time for it to slowly grow, become stronger, and eventually turn into a terrifying monster. In order to solve the village's food problem, Gao Tianwu had no choice but to personally lead a team out to find food. As a mutant, he possessed superhuman strength, so he was better able to dig up supplies buried under the snow. In the past, he had also worked in Tianhai City, delivering food in parcels, and working as a waiter in a bar, so he was quite familiar with the locations of some large supermarkets and hotels. He also knew that such places often had stockpiles. So, relying on his memory and the few high-rise buildings, he led a group of people and carefully searched through the heavy snow. After several days of hard work, they finally found some supplies in the snow. Although it wasn't much, they filled 2 dog sleds with it. Xiao Guang said happily to Gao Tianwu, "Brother Wu, this is great. If we save these supplies, we'll have food for several more days." Gao Tianwu exhaled a thick cloud of white mist, looking a little tired, but the joy in his eyes was unconcealable. "Good, let's keep up the momentum. I remember there's a large supermarket about 7 or 8 kilometers ahead. It's getting late, let them go back and rest first. We'll take a few more people there tomorrow to look around." As the sky grew dark, the temperature dropped even further at night. The group dared not linger and hurried back, dragging the sleds behind them. As it grew dark, Gao Tianwu led everyone back to Gaoyuan village. Although they had been busy all day in the wind and snow, everyone was still quite happy because they had gained something from the trip. After returning to the village, Gao Tianwu asked Xiao Guang to take the grain to the warehouse. He had expended so much energy that all he could think about was going back to sleep and recuperating. Xiao Guang obeyed and took the grain to the warehouse. Gao Tianwu didn't even take off his clothes, but wrapped himself in a quilt and closed his eyes. He didn't know how much time had passed when he suddenly heard a burst of shouting and cursing. "You dog, get up!" He immediately felt a sharp pain in his body. Gao Tianwu struggled to open his eyes, only to find that he couldn't move at all. He was tied up with ropes. He was shocked and looked up to see Meng Chuan leading a group of villagers, all looking at him with angry expressions. "What are you doing?" Gao Tianwu was completely confused. He didn't know why the villagers were doing this to him. "You know very well why." Meng Chuan walked over and kicked him directly in the stomach. When Gao Tianwu looked outside, the scene before his eyes immediately made his pupils contract. In the open space of the village, hundreds of torches were lit, and a large pot was set up in the middle, which was used in the village for slaughtering pigs during the New Year. His brothers, including his younger brother Xiao Guang, were all tied up and forced to kneel on the ground. Rebellion. That was the first word that came to Gao Tianwu's mind. "What are you doing? Why are you tying us up?" Gao Tianwu asked angrily. In response, someone hit him hard on the back of his legs with a stick, knocking him to the ground. Meng Chuan walked over, pointed at his nose and shouted, "Gao Tianwu, you've been relying on your supernatural powers to lord it over us for so long. All of us villagers have put up with you and your brothers for a long time. Today, we're going to skin you alive to set things right." Gao Tianwu's younger brothers were already beaten and covered in blood. Hearing Meng Chuan's words, they could only glare at him in anger. "You're full of shit." Xiao Guang's eyes were bloodshot. If it weren't for Brother Wu, Gaoyuan village would have been destroyed by the other villages long ago. "We ran out to find food for you, and this is how you treat us." A villager smiled coldly as he looked at Xiao Guang and Gao Tianwu on the ground, a look of triumph flashing in his eyes. Yes, during the most difficult days, it was indeed Gao Tianwu who led his brothers to protect the village. At first, the villagers were very grateful to them. But as time passed and the danger around them disappeared, they began to forget the hardships of that time. And they gradually began to harbor resentment toward Gao Tianwu, the village chief who had always strictly managed them. Although they didn't dare to say it on ordinary days, now the situation had changed. They were the ones who were now high and mighty, while Gao Tianwu and his men had become prisoners that everyone wanted to beat up. Looking at these people who had once been nothing but yes-men and flatterers, now turned into fallen dogs, the villagers felt nothing but satisfaction in their hearts. For most people, they didn't care about the truth. As long as they saw people of high status being beaten down, they would cheer, then get a share of the spoils, and wait for the next person in power to fall.